Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are wrestling with something I think a lot of us feel. It's that tension, you know? How do you invite someone into a conversation about faith, about deep beliefs, without feeling, well, awkward?
Or worse, being seen as pushy or insensitive.
Exactly. And that fear often leads to just silence, lost opportunities.
It really does. And, our sources suggest the script we often run in our heads is maybe a bit flawed. We think proclamation means, like, getting on a soapbox.
Right, declaring truth loudly.
Yeah, and when we realize that doesn't really connect or feels wrong, we often just shut down completely. That fear of coercion, which is a valid fear. By the way, it leaves people feeling stuck.
Okay, let's unpack that fear then, because it really is the main obstacle, isn't it?
I think so.
So the core idea, the big reframe we found in our material today, is thinking about proclamation less as coercion and more as cultivation.
Cultivation. I like that. Like tending soil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tending the relational soil so that maybe truth can take root more naturally on its own time with, gentle watering, not a fire hose.
They call this contextual proclamation, and it really shifts the whole method, doesn't it?
It does. It moves evangelism away from being this, high-pressure, awkward
A
thing.
transaction almost.
Yeah, a transaction, to seeing it as just a natural, maybe long-term extension of real friendship.
So our mission today is really to give you a kind of blueprint for that, a 4-stage relational rhythm.
Moving from just basic curiosity all the way to commitment.
That's the goal.
What I find fascinating here is that the shift isn't just, a clever technique. It seems deeply rooted theologically.
Oh, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier that the modern world, maybe especially now, is pretty skeptical of generic preaching.
Very skeptical, but at the same time, intensely hungry for authenticity, for personal stories.
So it's not the what, that's the problem, it's the how.
That's exactly right. The challenge isn't the content of what you share, but how you actually show up in the relationship. And if we look for a model, the sources point straight to the incarnation.
Okay, the Missio Dei, God's mission.
Right. God didn't just, stand way off and shout instructions down.
No.
God moved in, became present.
So taking that as our model, what does that look like practically? We're not just talking abstract ideas here.
No, behaviorally, it means proximity comes before persuasion. God entered the mess, sat with people considered sinners, washed feet, embodied the message before delivering the sermon, you could say.
Right.
So if that's our template, the sources argue we have to prioritize actual presence, physical, emotional presence, over trying to maintain some kind of theological distance. We have to be neighbors first, friends first.
That totally changes the job description, doesn't it, from preacher to maybe gardener or neighbor?
I think so, and it feels especially relevant now if society is getting more fragmented, more skeptical, maybe more digital.
Then the only way to really communicate deep truth effectively is through these hyper-personal, invitational ways.
Precisely. Otherwise, our conversations just stay safe, polite, and maybe a bit unfruitful. Proclamation has to be cultivation, not coercion.
Okay, that lays the groundwork really nicely with this 4-stage pilgrimage you mentioned, the rhythmic anatomy.
Yeah, and rhythm is the key word. Our sources really stress that each stage builds on the last. If you skip one,
You lose the harmony.
exactly. And that's often where that uncomfortable, cushy feeling comes from, right? Trying to jump ahead in the rhythm.
Make sense? So what are the 4 movements?
Okay, think of them as dialogue, then stories, then study, and finally, follower.
Dialogue, stories, study, follower. Okay, let's start with movement 1, dialogue. This is where you said curiosity opens.
Right, so if the goal is preparing that relational soil, the concrete practice here is, well, it's radical empathy. It's non-anxious presence.
Non-anxious presence, meaning
Meaning you're there to create space for the other person to just be seen and heard. Fully. Your main job is listening, like significantly more than you speak.
what kind of ratio are we talking?
Maybe like 80% listening, 20% speaking. You start conversationally. Just asking about their life, their hopes, their struggles, what they're actually going through. Offering presence, not proof.
Okay, but here's a tricky part, I think. How do we stop ourselves from jumping too quickly? From just listening to trying to offer solutions. That's often where it feels pushy, right? When the other person feels like they're being interrogated, not heard.
That is the absolute key guardrail for this stage. That non-anxious part means you are focusing only on understanding and validating their experience, not fixing it, not yet.
So no advice giving at this stage.
Ideally, 0 spiritual advice.
Wow.
A good goal might be leave the conversation having learned maybe 3 new things about their life, their perspective. The main tool is active listening. using prompts like, tell me more about that. Or maybe you're reflecting back. So I hear you saying X. Can you walk me through what that feels like for you?
Just sustained attention. That builds trust, I imagine.
It's the foundation.
Okay, so once that relational soil is tilled a bit, we move to movement 2. Stories, where curiosity deepens.
Exactly. The aim shifts here. Now it's about witnessing through narrative, sharing your own story, your testimony, but also using scripture as story.
Why stories?
Well, stories work differently than lectures, don't they? They invite imagination, identification, they make abstract ideas feel tangible. I mean, think about Jesus. He used parables constantly. He rarely just argued doctrine point blank. He invited listeners to imagine this kingdom they could actually walk into.
So instead of explaining, say, the doctrine of grace,
You might share a short, honest story about a time grace met you, maybe in a moment of personal failure or struggle.
how do we keep that kind of vulnerability from feeling like, I don't know, a performance or TMI?
That's a great question. The sources actually offer a really helpful 2-minute testimony template. It's designed for honesty, not polish. It focuses on 4 phases. The genuine struggle you faced, the sort of restless search for an answer or relief, the actual encounter with faith or God, and then the change that followed.
And the key is honesty.
Crucially, yes. And leaving the struggle and the search visible, that's what makes it relatable. The change isn't presented as some perfect finish line. It's usually an ongoing process. We're sharing messy discovery stories, not flawless success stories.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, a good, honest story can bridge that gap between politeness and real interest.
Far more effectively, often, than a 10-minute explanation of theology.
All right, moving into movement 3. Study. Curiosity becomes inquiry. This feels like where things could get formal, or maybe where the fear of debate creeps in.
Yeah, this is a pivot point. The aim is definitely to move from story towards substance, meeting those real, sometimes tough questions that come up with a shared look at scripture and reason. But the character of the stage is vital. It needs what one source called hospitality for doubt.
Hospitality for doubt. I like that. So, if someone asks a really skeptical question, maybe about suffering or science or whatever, how do we engage in study without it turning into a verbal sparring match, where the goal becomes winning the argument?
We have to model humility in the process itself. The practice, maybe think of the Bereans and Acts who examine the scriptures. It's a shared search.
So you don't just give them the answer.
No, you offer to read a passage together, not to prove your point, but to genuinely seek meaning side by side. You could frame it like, wow, that's a really hard question. I wrestle with that too. Would you be open to reading this short passage with me and just telling me what you think it says about that longing or struggle?
That framing is really different. It puts them in the driver's seat of interpretation.
Exactly. It models that faith isn't about having all the answers neatly packaged. It's often about searching together. It makes the environment communal and humble. Doubt isn't the enemy. It can actually be a pathway to deeper understanding.
If faith is going to stick, it needs roots in truth. And that means making space for hard questions.
Without dismissing them, yeah.
Okay, finally, movement 4. Follower. The highest level, you said. Curiosity moves to commitment.
Right. The aim here is the clear but gentle invitation. An invitation to follow Jesus, and importantly, to enter into community. This is where things like baptism, accountability, shared discipleship rhythms come into the picture. We're moving beyond just exploring ideas towards actual belonging, covenantal belonging.
This feels like where we need those guardrails the most, maybe? How do we make sure the invitation is genuinely low-barrier patient and avoids that high-pressure sales pitch feeling?
The key practice here is accompaniment, patient accompaniment. The invitation has to feel genuine, freely extended, never forced. And it often involves clear, small next steps.
Like what?
It might be as simple as offering to share a meal with some other believers, or maybe joining a short, 6-week group focused on a specific topic they're interested in. Or yes, eventually, baptism. But the point is, conversion isn't usually just a single decision point. It's entry into a sustained way of life.
Which requires walking alongside people patiently. Okay, now let's really nail down those practical guardrails. Because even using this gentle rhythm, that fear of rejection, fear of being pushy, it can still stop people cold, maybe stuck in stage 1, just dialogue.
Absolutely. We need tools to invite with confidence, but without coercion.
And the core tool is?
The permission principle. This is central to the whole approach we've been discussing. Proclamation needs to be intentional, yes, but always invitational. which means you always get relational permission before you share a spiritual insight, a personal story, or a piece of scripture. Always ask first.
Why does simply asking permission change the dynamic so much? It seems so simple.
Well, psychologically, it does a couple of things. First, it honors the other person's autonomy. You're handing the power over to them. They choose whether to open that door or not.
Which lowers their defenses.
Immediately, it lowers cognitive defensiveness because it's an offering, not an imposition. And second, if they say no or not right now,
You just respect that.
you respect it and you simply continue cultivating the relationship. No offense taken. You just keep tending the soil.
Okay, we need some specific language here. What are some good ways to actually ask for permission? What does that sound like?
Our sources emphasize using sort of conditional language. Instead of launching straight into advice, you might try something like, I went through something similar a few years back. Would you be open to hearing a little about what helped me navigate that?
Okay. Or after they share a struggle.
Maybe. Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult. There's actually a story I read once in the Bible that speaks so directly to that kind of pain. Would you mind if I shared it? Or maybe not now, but sometime.
That feels completely different. It makes the sharing about their potential need not my agenda to speak.
Precisely. Trust has to come before persuasion. Permission is the little mechanism that ensures the relationship is actually ready to carry the weight of that spiritual conversation. If you don't get permission,
You stay in dialogue. Or stories, maybe.
you stay right where the relationship is comfortable. You don't force it.
Okay, one last practical piece. Metrics. If we're focused on patient cultivation, avoiding coercion, we shouldn't be tracking conversions like sales quotas, right?
Absolutely not. That's counterproductive.
So what are healthy metrics? How do we know if we're being faithful to this process?
We need to measure the health of the process itself, not just the immediate outcome. So leaders or even individuals could track relational inputs. Things like, are we seeing an increase in the number of genuine relational conversations we're starting? That's a dialogue count.
Okay.
Or how many people are we intentionally inviting to move from just sharing stories to maybe exploring questions together? Tracking the number entering study groups, for example, tells us if we're successfully sparking that deeper curiosity and inquiry.
That makes sense. It's like using metrics to spot friction points in the rhythm.
Exactly. If you have tons of dialogue happening, but very few invitations into story or study, maybe people aren't feeling safe enough, or we're not being vulnerable enough ourselves.
Or if lots enter study, but few seem to move toward community or commitment.
Maybe the study stage is becoming too academic, too much like a debate club, and not relational enough, not enough hospitality for doubt, perhaps.
So the metrics serve formation. They help us learn and adjust our approach.
They should serve formation and pastoral care, never commodify people or create pressure.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. How does this four-stage rhythm dialogue, stories, study, follower, connect to the bigger picture, like the broader strategies people use for community building or church growth?
It actually maps really neatly onto that common framework of send, strengthen, and sustain.
Okay, break that down.
Send is essentially the outreach phase. That covers dialogue and stories. It's about equipping people to be present in relationships and to share their narratives effectively.
Makes sense.
Strengthen focuses primarily on the study stage, building that deeper intellectual and spiritual foundation through shared inquiry and grappling with tough questions.
And sustain.
That handles the follower stage. It's all about long-term formation, developing those discipleship rhythms, community belonging, maybe even raising up new leaders to keep the whole cycle going. Send, strengthen, sustain.
And that send phase, the dialogue and stories, really hinges on that narrative bridge we talked about.
It really, really does. It's worth repeating. That well-crafted, honest, maybe 3-minute personal story, focused on your struggle and the grace you found, that might be the single most powerful tool you have for bridging the gap between just polite curiosity and genuine, deeper inquiry.
So, pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener, today, as you think about maybe becoming this kind of relational gardener? What's the final thought we should leave you mulling over?
I think it's this. The measure of faithfulness in this kind of work isn't really speed, it's presence. This work, this cultivation, it requires two seemingly contradictory things. Incredible patience, the patience to wait for a seed to actually sprout. And, at the same time, this deep, quiet courage. The courage to simply ask permission before you offer to water it. You're just invited to be present, and maybe, when the time feels right, to ask a gentle question.
That's a beautiful challenge. Patience and courage.
Yeah.
So, for an actionable takeaway this week, what's one small step someone could take?
Maybe choose just one relationship, one person you genuinely care about. And this week, Intentionally practice that dialogue posture.
Just listening.
Yeah, commit to maybe one 15-minute period of just radical listening, no fixing, just understanding. And maybe have one short relevant story ready in the back of your mind. But only share it if you sense an opening AD you explicitly ask for and receive permission. Practice the permission principle. See how it feels.
That small intentional act, that feels like where the transformation could really begin. Thank you for guiding us through this. It really does reframe proclamation as this artful dance.
A dance of presence, story, study, and authentic invitation.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to dive deep into these kinds of necessary shifts in thinking.
And thank you, our listener, for joining us for the deep dive. We hope you'll continue exploring this knowledge, maybe reread the sources, and keep applying these insights in your own life and relationships. We'll talk soon.